Welcome back. As you saw earlier, Liberal leadership hopeful Mark Carney is in the Maritimes. He outlined some of his priorities earlier in the day in Halifax. The former governor of the Banks of Canada and England joins us in studio. We're very happy to have him. Welcome.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks.
I guess the first thing I should ask you, if you win the leadership, become Prime Minister, do you intend to continue to prorogue Parliament?
Well, Parliament's going to be back on the 24th of March. Whatever happens in the leadership, and certainly it's crucial for Canadians that Parliament is back and it's working and setting the priorities for Canadians. Look, there's lots of issues. There's lots of issues been held up. And then on top of that, we have this economic crisis that has been caused by President Trump, so it's time to act.
Would you call a snap election?
Look, we need a strong mandate from the Canadian people, but what we're going to do is what's right for Canadians. If we're in the middle of a crisis and there's specific things that need to get done at that point, we will do them.
I want to ask you about tariffs, but first off, I'd like to ask you about your comments today that you canceled the consumer portion of the carbon tax. Does that happen on day one?
Yeah, will happen on day one. And look, what's happened with the consumer carbon tax, and it's a very strong issue, as you know, here in Atlantic Canada, is it's become very divisive. So we're going to do several things, and I think this is a crucial difference. You know, Pierre Poilievre, it's just axe the tax. That's it. He doesn't care about the fact that most households will be worse off. He doesn't care what it means for jobs and future growth in the economy. So what we're going to do, we'll axe the consumer carbon tax. We will get the large polluters to pay for incentives for people in Halifax, across Nova Scotia, Atlantic Canada, across the country, to make investments in cleaner appliances, in EVs if they want, to insulate their home, and on and on. Those are choices that people make as well. Sorry, I had to say this, Todd. Yeah. We're very focused on making sure that not just costs go down, but the overall incomes of all households go up. So we're going to be announcing some additional measures for that to be the case.
You just mentioned that Canadian households might be worse off. If that's the case, why cancel?
Well, this is a key point. If you're Pierre Poilievre, he just stops there, acts the tax, he doesn't care. Doesn't acknowledge that households, on average, take a household in this region, it's a household of four, it's probably $800-900 a year on net that they will be worse off. We know that. We get it. We care. So what we're doing, not just providing incentives if they take choices, but we'll be providing additional measures, economic measures, I'll announce in the next few weeks, that make sure that they come out ahead.
One of the things you mentioned is that you would offer incentives to buy things like energy-efficient refrigerators, to get insulation done in homes. A lot of those programs already exist for those incentives. How is that going to help Canada reach net zero?
So there's a couple of things. One, what we're going to do, we're going to look at all of those. We're going to make sure those incentives are big enough and broad enough and clear enough to Canadians. Then secondly, what we're going to do is make sure not that the government pays, not that we as taxpayers pay, but the large polluters pay. And so what happens?
But does that not ultimately trickle down?
No, because what the big companies are producing, by and large, are not products that we are consuming. There's some element of that, but by and large, a steel company, how much steel are you using these days, Todd? I mean, not as much we used to. So anyway, so that's core to it. And then what happens is that those companies, they end up having a choice. Are they going to reduce emissions in their, say, factory, in that case of the steel company, or are they going to pay, via the government, are they going to pay Canadians to reduce those? It makes the system much more effective. It'll move it forward. We'll reduce emissions by more. We'll get more money in the pockets of hardworking Canadians.
So you're going to eliminate the consumer end of the carbon tax. Ms. Freeland said she would do the same thing. Mr. Guilbeault, who was an architect of the program, who once, I believe, said he would leave government if there wasn't a carbon tax, has said that he would be able to put it aside. For years, the Trudeau government, though, has told Canadians this is the only way to get to net zero, is to have carbon pricing and to have a carbon tax. And now suddenly the Liberal Party is stepping away from that.
Well, a couple of things. One is we still have carbon pricing for the large companies, and that's essential for them to become more competitive and move forward. Secondly, you mentioned Stephen Guilbeault. He would have walked away from the government if we didn't have a comprehensive plan. And this is the difference between me, who's hasn't been a career politician, doesn't just put out press releases with half-baked ideas, doesn't just go for slogans, but waits until we have a whole plan that addresses the issues. And so why Stephen Guilbeault and others, a lot of environmental groups and others are supporting what I'm doing, what I'm proposing, is because it ensures we reduce emissions by as much, if not more, than we were anyways. It makes sure that Canadian households have more in their pocketbook. It makes us more competitive. And let me make a very, very important point, Todd. You know, we're meeting here today. Literally, on the weekend, the President of the United States is threatening this country with massive tariffs, economic force. We got to stand up for Canada. We are going to stand up for Canada. But the other thing we're going to do, and we can do with this plan, if I may, and I'll stop here, is we can leapfrog the Americans. They're turning inwards. They're trying to turn back the clock. This country, this region, we can move forward. We're putting in place the policies to do that.
So how do you do that? You called earlier today, you called President Trump a bully. What would you do specifically tomorrow to counter those tariffs? Because they're coming.
So first thing, and I'll be absolutely clear, you're in a negotiation, you want to have a united front. We have our negotiators literally down there right now as we're talking. Melanie Joly, the foreign minister, the finance minister is down, our public safety minister, David McGuinty. I'm four square behind them, lockstep. But what specifically do we do? You do a couple of things in a negotiation, particularly with a bully. First up, you stand up to that bully. They're going to put tariffs on us. We're going to put tariffs on them. We'll match dollar to dollar. We will target those tariffs where it hurts the most in the United States, hurts the least in Canada. First thing. Second thing, what you always do in a negotiation, and I've been in a lot of negotiations, what you always do in a negotiation is you strengthen your outside option. What is our outside option in Canada? That is to make this economy as strong as possible. Take measures, and that's why I'm in this race, to make our economy as strong as it can be, and not just stronger than it has been, but the strongest economy in the G7.
I'll ask you about that in a second. Late yesterday, President Trump said they might exempt Canadian oil and gas. Are you prepared to use oil and gas by taxing or curbing exports as a bit of a hammer in a trade war?
Yeah. A couple of things about President Trump. He said a lot. He said we will, April 1st, February 1st, maybe February 15th, maybe oil and gas in, maybe this, maybe that. Justification for this changes all the time. Someday it's fentanyl, sometimes. So we got to be a little careful on over indexing on what he says at any individual moment, and just be clear. First and foremost, we're going to stand up. Secondly, where I started, which is no, we've got to keep our cards close to ourselves. There's no point turning over the cards in a negotiation in a poker game. But there are certain things that are much more effective in hitting the Americans, protecting our economy. And I think there's a hierarchy of measures that we would take. I'm not going to negotiate in public. I'm going to stand four square. I'll tell you, after March 9th, I hope to be the leader. I hope it's resolved by that before then. But if I'm the leader and we're still having a dispute with the Americans, I'll be leading the negotiation directly with the president.
Well, let me ask you about the economy. You mentioned we have a $62 billion deficit.
Yeah.
If the tariffs go through and a stimulus package is presented to help save, Susan Holt of New Brunswick last night said that her province stands to lose 6,000 jobs. That's with a population roughly the size of Edmonton or Winnipeg or Quebec City. A stimulus package would be tens of billions of dollars, no doubt. $62 billion deficit. How do you keep the economy going? How do you keep it from collapse? Those are big numbers. Can we afford that?
I just want to be clear. Let's be clear. It's important to use words properly. I'm Prime Minister. Our economic plan. We don't face those types of issues. This is a serious situation, but this is also a strong economy. We need to use our resources as the federal government, Premier Holt as her government as well, and I talked to her last week, including about these issues. We need to use our resources to maximum impact. And one of the issues, one of the reasons why I'm running for leader is, I'll be frank, and I've said this a few times, I want to reinforce it. The federal government has been spending too much, and it's investing too little. So there's certain things that we're doing at the federal level that haven't been as disciplined, that have led to things like the $62 billion deficit. We need to clamp down on those. What we need to do is put more money in the pockets of Canadians. You'll hear more about that in the next few weeks, as well as, and this is absolutely crucial, it was a big part of what today's announcement was about, and it's a big part of our future, is making sure our companies are investing in the future. The federal government, precious tax dollars, catalyzing maximum investment. That's what we're going to do. And if I can make one last point, it is always the case. It is always the case in our system. If the economy slows sharply because of some shock from abroad, then that puts upward pressure on the deficit. And what you need to do in that circumstance is make sure that you're spending on the right things, being resolute, providing a plan to move forward, and that's what we'll do.
I've only got about 30 seconds here, but I want to get this in. You said this morning that you're not a politician. You've got the support of the majority of the Trudeau government caucus. Do you fear it might come across as looking like a new label on an old product?
I'm a very different person than the current Prime Minister. I was born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. My parents were teachers. I grew up in Edmonton. I'm a goalie. He's a snowboarder. You know, there's lots and lots of differences. I have lots of experience in the business world, experience around the world. I'm bringing something very different. I'm only in this.
You've been closely aligned to this government, though.
Look, I've provided some advice to this government. Quite often they haven't taken my advice, and there's a number of things the government has done that I didn't agree with and that I will change. It's also about the moment, though. We are in an economic crisis caused by events south of the border, but on top of cost of living crises, housing crises we feel right here, obviously in Nova Scotia and Halifax particularly. We need to move against those. For better or worse, this is what I know.
Mr. Carney,
this is what I know. This is what I can do.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, for taking the time to come to see us while you're in the Maritimes. Mark Carney, of course, who is a candidate for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada. We'll take a time out. We'll be right back.